Hey guys, we're going through the Bible verse by verse, a plain and simple study, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, book by book through the entire Bible. We are currently in the book of Genesis where it began. And let me just, again, by way of quick reminder, I am taking my time with the first 11 chapters of Genesis because there is so much to unpack. So, I just want to unpack it. We'll probably pick up our pace and move faster, but for now, I just want to, again, unpack this. Now, we left off getting into the actual days of creation. And so in verse 1, he says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then he says, now the earth was formed. And one of the things I said, and I want to keep in mind because at some point we are all going to face. I face it more because I'm out there, and a lot of people are not. So I get out there, I look at other posts, I look at opinions, I engage with atheists, Muslims, people at all on all levels, okay, and so and I realize that a lot of people won't, and trust me, I'm not saying you have to, because sometimes it is frustrating. So the thing is that I think there's certain points that I think you would want to understand about the scientific response, or I should say those who say they follow science. So as we get into the days of creation here, the Bible critics will criticize and say, well, the order of creation is off, which gives it no credibility. My response to that is that first and foremost, unless you can really have a sit down with God and say, okay, well, God, this is how I'm criticizing. Remember, they're coming in on what's already created. And as I said, if you was to take a look at right now, if God was to say, hey guys, I'm gonna let you all watch me, right? They say, okay, I'm gonna let you watch me, and I'm going to do for Mars, right, the planet Mars, what I did for planet Earth, right? If God said that, right, so what would he have to do? First, we can see, we know because we've been there, we've got some cameras and stuff up there, right? One big flat nothing, right? And let's even say this, let's add this, let's say that I'm going to do for Mars what I did for Earth, meaning I'm going to make it habitable for man. So now what would God have to do, right? In other words, God may say, well, you know what, I'm going to have to move Mars closer. I'm going to have to I'm trying to think which one of the planets that doesn't rotate, that one side is always day and the other side is always night, and it rotates around the sun. So maybe God, let's say if it was that planet, God would have to say, well, you know what, I'm gonna have to move some things around, right? So when we read this, again, this is not designed to say, I'm gonna give you all a step-by-step, process. Like if you ever done nowadays YouTube, you can do how-to on YouTube. They can tell you how to fix your furnace. They can tell you how to install, a faucet. And so they're going to go step by step. They're going to say, first and foremost, cut the water off and do this, that, and the other, right? Step by step. The Bible is not for that. The Bible is giving us, is just telling the story. Alright, so again, it said verse 2, now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness covered the surface of the watery depths, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. So the first picture we see here is how the earth is submerged in water. So we have God creating the heavens and the earth, And then now we see the earth as God now begins to work on the planet Earth itself. So he says, the earth was formless and empty. Darkness covered the surface of the watery depths, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, let there be light. And there was light. So notice there are two things in this chapter that is constantly repeated. One, God said, and then we're going to see the result of what God said. It was good. Okay? Important to kind of note, because remember, as we start off, everything is good. So he says, let there be light. Now, what would have been the light? Where he defines what the light is. The light is day. And then he says, let me go back, verse 3. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Verse 4, God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from darkness. God called the light day, and he called the darkness night. Evening came, and then morning, the first day. It would be interesting to note that the day starts in the evening and then cycles around day and then evening. You would also know that these are 24-hour cycle days, okay? Not day ages. Now, this is an argument that certain theologians make, in my opinion, to try to find a happy medium with evolution and scientists. No, because first and foremost, those scientists won't accept your happy medium. If you change the name and say creationism, they don't care. So they're not going to accept what you say anyway. It's silly. And then how do you explain? Because they have an explanation for light and the formation of light. How do you explain what God said? See, the whole point is that, remember, their motive, starting with the age of humanism in the 18th century, and the idea of evolution and stuff, and then science latches onto evolution. Keep this in mind, okay? Their motive is anti-God. So, so God said, now in God's mind, yes, he knows all what's going on down to the very, micro, organism, atoms and all that. So understand that God created science. He created all what we see here, that all what man is discovering, God has already created. And its start is with God. God said, let there be light. And then he said he saw that the light is good. Now again, in this context, he defines light as day and then night as darkness. And you remember I said that the term really night represents the presence of sin. Even here, what we see with creation, even here you see the presence of it. In other words, when we come to the New Jerusalem, we will not see darkness. There will not be any night, no darkness, perpetual light. And we know that at this time, Lucifer has already contaminated the creation with sin, with the rebellion. And that's interesting because the very presence of night shows that. Alright, verse 6. Then God said, let there be an expanse between the waters, separating water from water. So God made the water and separated the water under the expanse from the water above the expanse, and it was so. And God called the expanse sky. Evening came, in the morning came in the second day. Now, you see the hydrological cycle that God creates. The earth is still kind of submerged in water. The expanse, what he says, is when you have water in the sky and you have water underneath, right? And by the way, it's a very fascinating statement how we have water. Now, some places do not have water in terms of drought. But most places on the earth, you have ground sources, aquifers, and all of that. And they call it the hydrological cycle. In other words, you really never lose water. So what happens, right? You put a pot of water on a stove and you boil it. What does it do? It turns into a gas. Now you stick that same pot of water into your freezer, it freezes. So what happens? The water evaporates in the sky. Rain comes, and then it irrigates it. It rains and it goes seeps into the ground. Thus, you have aquifers in ground. In fact, I think in the area that I live at, you can probably drill down some 35 feet. You'll see water, groundwater. Now, that's not true for deserts and things like that. There's, you may have to dig deeper or something like that. But anyway, so now we're at the second day. We're at the second day. And it was so. Now notice God is speaking, by the way. He's speaking this. He's speaking. Verse 9. Then God said, let the water under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth. And he called the gathering of the water seas, and God saw it was good. Okay? So at this point, now, it's kind of interesting that we see that the earth, which is what? Dry land. That's basically what earth means. Now, of course, our planet is called earth, but the term earth, as God used it, was simply dry land. So now, all of the waters that we see, now the time when God is creating, the earth was submerged in water. God spoke, and these waters gathered together. Now, of course, we call them, especially the larger bodies, we call them oceans, right? And so notice he said that but understand that the earth is one, and this is going to be interesting here, the earth is one land mass. Very interesting. All right, so now we see sort of the framework, the body, the planet. Everything is set in motion here. And now God is going to begin to plenish the earth. Right? So, as we would probably say, the infrastructure is set. The seas. Later, Job would say that God set the boundaries of these oceans. Partly by the gravitational pull of the moon, such and such and such and such. Okay? But basically, God's power. God said it. Verse 11. Then God said, let the earth produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit, with seed in it according to their kind. And it was so. The earth produced vegetation, seed-bearing plants, according to their kind, and trees bearing fruit, with the seed in it according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. Evening came, and then morning, and the third day. So now, vegetation. And again, he's not given a detail of all the kinds of plants. We see it here. God just gave it. And notice, God produced, and what was created in them was the ability to reproduce. The seed was in there. And then he said, and God said, right? God saw that it was good. Notice again the phrase. Notice he said God spoke, and then notice God said, and then what God produced, it was good. So we get this definition of God, what God says is good. And we can measure this, what God says is good, and then based upon what is not good. Verse 14. Then God said, let there be light in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night. They will serve as signs for festivals and for days and for years. Kind of interesting, Moses right here uses the term festivals at this point. And notice he said that they will be for days and years. Again, 24-hour cycles. So he said, and then, so the light in the sky. Now at this point he's talking about what? The stars and the moon. Okay. Alright. Now, what's kind of interesting here, I'm looking at this thing here. Okay, I'm actually running out of time right here. But so far, notice the expanse. So we're on day number 3. Now I want to say this. Day number 3, there's this kind of debate as to what people try to use. That's what they call day ages. Like and this is to try to find a happy medium with, again, trying to kind of find a happy medium or to peacefully coexist with evolution. And I again, just not. There are a lot of things about creation. Again, this is not meant to give a blow by blow. He's telling us. I think he's giving us the essence right here. Do I believe that it took God 3 days to create the heavens and the earth? I mean, so far the earth, what he's done with the earth? Yes, I do. Do I think God needed 14 billion years? No. Let me say this. At this point, because critics will come hard against us and say that doesn't make sense. Science contradicts this. While I will concede I'm not a scientist, I'm not an astrophysicist, while I would concede that that I'm not, so I can't speak to their points. What I can say is, again, we believe the biblical narrative. And the reason why I said that's important to understand is because whether we understand this or not, now understand this. See, think about this. The fact that Superman can leap a building in a single bound. The fact that he can travel faster than a speeding bullet. Now, if y'all don't know what I'm talking about, the very old 1950s Superman, it came on saying faster than a speeding bullet. He can leap a building in a single bound. And he can stop a freight train. The fact that he can do those things, right? You don't have to understand the matrix of why Superman can do those things. Some of the movies, later movies, try to delve into that, but it doesn't really matter. He's Superman. It's in the name. So my point is this. Do we have to understand all of the things that's going on here in Genesis? No. God created the heavens and the earth. God created the heavens and the earth. It's in his name. It's God. And when he said God said, then hey, yeah, God can whip up a universe for sure. God can whip up a universe in 6 days. Now, that's not even to say that God can't say. Remember, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. It could mean that God worked on the Milky Galaxy or our solar system. I mean, my point is, there are more ways we could look at it. In other words, remember, as I said, suppose God was to say, hey, I'm going to do something with Mars. right? Or maybe I'm going to go to the next solar system and do something with that and start working with that. And at that time, could God do it in 6 days? Of course he could. Now, another thing that God is doing it is what is interesting that we have the 6 days is because God is, it will be a testament to what is going to go on in the earth. And I'll explain that in the next video. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll see you next time. All right.